50% plastic, 50% solution. 50% plastic, 50% down.
So, we found this company because we're looking around the planet for companies that are doing interesting things like this. And we want to talk about the Box Solutions story. We have folks who are doing this with wood waste to biochar syngas and turning them into charging stations for EVs. These are the types of climate tech companies that we're working on to scale to solve the problems, and we need to help work them out. So the video, but you can hear it, it's still going off. Because you can see
It wasn't quite settling right, and this word came to me, and Graham and I talked about it. It was called trinary. Everybody's heard of binary? Binary 0 and 1, on off, on computer, power on, power off. And this word trinary came to my mind, and I went, what the heck is trinary? I didn't pull up my phone. I wanted to wrestle with it, so for about 2 hours I tried to figure out what is trinary without looking it up. Ended up that one of the definitions I had was correct, and that's -1, 0, +1. Instead of pretty simple.
pretty awesome. Mine is pretty simple. I just say it's where impact returns and meet financial returns, right? We know what happens when capitalism focuses just on financial returns and talks about the downsides and externalities. We look at the impact and we try to measure those returns. I've talked with my personal beef with nonprofits that don't try to put themselves out of business. I've talked with the CEOs of GuideStar and Charity Navigator and those that are supposed to measure how nonprofits deliver impact. I've talked with government officials about how they measure impact. I've talked with corporations about how they measure impact. And they are working on something that's new and working with people to push that in a new direction so that we can actually measure it and value it in businesses like these. And I think B corporations and such are all these different methodologies to start a new direction, but we're wandering in the wilderness. There's no consensus yet. There are, as you would see, a couple leading industry frameworks, like the UN Sustainable Development Goals that we are woefully behind in implementing, but they do cover a broad range of these 17 areas that talk about how to make sustainable development work on the planet. And there's also this one that I'm exploring a little bit more that I like on the right that's called the 9 Planets, based on 44 different ways of measuring it and hundreds of companies around the planet that are doing it. It's a challenge because we're early in the cycle. Why do we share this? Because there are people here who want to deliver on impact in all sorts of ways, whatever you're best suited with. And if you're a person who wants to tackle one of these approaches, whether it's a B Corp or it's an IRIS or a GIN or SASB or whichever, there's a place for everyone to do what they do because it's going to take an army of us working full fusion, and because there's no consensus on how all this works. So we wanted to tackle a couple of these before we left. Do you want to go ESG first?
We've been up 28 minutes, and we want to make sure that you all are okay. Why don't you go first on this?
Okay. So, quick one. ESG, environmental, social, governance, are corporate measures for how a corporation determines its sustainability, right? But they're not necessarily tied to the impact goals that we talked about from the UN Sustainable Development Goals of the planetary boundaries. They're more about, the best description I had was I remember an interview with Coca-Cola's chief sustainability officer and supply chain officer in about 8 years ago. And they said they did analysis on their supply chain. And to clarify that those things are different, because a corporation has a good ESG policy, doesn't necessarily mean that they're a mission-driven company trying to deliver impact along the areas that we care about. And we have to be vigilant on the certifications and the measurement tools that are used in order to get this kind of right. Let's go to
We've been up for 30 minutes.
Okay, all right.
Are you okay with that?
Now I get my part to be geeky. Okay. No, all right. So we're over time, but or we're almost over time because I didn't see my hook sign up there yet. But all we had really was we had a couple. Sustainability versus regeneration, right? Sustainability says we're able to do what we want to be able to do in perpetuity. Coca-Cola continuing to make Coke because they find some way to use less sugar, right? Regeneration says I actually am rebuilding the environment. that I'm using regenerative agriculture practices here, like our colleague up there, who's rebuilding the soils through no-till ag, or through people who are rebuilding biodiversity corridors, or rebuilding the kelp forest in the ocean, like one of the companies that we're looking at. The importance is regeneration is essential because of the damage we've done to the planet. Sustainability is not enough, and we're looking for solutions that allow us to do that. We can skip the market approach and just recap that, you know, we talked a little through our story. We talked a little bit about a company that's doing something interesting, and we really appreciate your time and attention. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Own, emergence in our own ability to grow into becoming the best versions of ourselves. And the way that we see these things happening all around us is absolutely, it's mind-blowing to me how much more evident the emergence of we humans have become in terms of just exploring to elevate our consciousness and our awareness of those around us. I'm one of these people that tends to believe that we're going to figure this out. That humankind, there's a lot of discussion about machine learning and AI and other things, and it's going to be the end of humanity. We hear this. I'm one of these people that believe that we're going to figure this out, and we're going to continue to grow and elevate, and we're going to put humanity on a path to greater things. And I'm so excited about where I see things going. This particular topic, if you think about all the different modalities and the way that people are known of business consciousness, if you want to call it that, and that's what we're going to talk about in this next panel. I will share with you that we had a curveball thrown at us a little bit. So if you read in the guidebook, there are two panelists that are named and mentioned in the guidebook who are not able to be here. Frida Bonsall, one of the founding advisory board members of the Do More Good movement, is really ill, and unfortunately she was not able to be here this morning. And Dr. Lou Lucas, who's one of the leading researchers around the use of psychedelic treatments, specifically for cancer patients, terminal cancer patients, the work she's doing out of...
And my transformation came as the result of an existential crisis in my organization. At first, it started out kind of like a possibility. I saw it on the horizon. It might become present, and then that possibility became a reality. I saw this crisis barreling toward me, and I panicked. And out of that panic, I started taking a bunch of fear-based actions. I started strategizing to figure out how to get through this crisis. I started planning. I created due dates and deadlines, held people accountable aggressively, and basically micromanaged. And as a result of that, I got exactly what you think you'd get. I had people leaving my organization, the very people that I needed to get myself over this crisis, exiting. It got to the point where my entire leadership team was on the verge of quitting, and I was cornered. At the same time, I was dealing with a co-owner who was also panicking, and he had different ideas about how the organization ought to be running. And he started to try to get me to implement those ideas in the business, and I resisted. They weren't in line with my strategy. Eventually I caved, and it didn't work. I wasn't bought in. It wasn't working for me. And when a person is in that situation, when they feel disempowered, when they feel lack of partnership, when they feel like trust isn't present, one of the things that goes through their mind is, well, I'll just quit. I have this problem in front of me. I have people leaving. My leadership team's going to leave. And the other thing that I could do is I could find a way to exit this co-owner. And both of these things were against my core values. I was cornered by both the situation and my options. Two options, felt like a paradox. What was I going to do? Luckily, it was against my core values, and I sat with it. I sat with this existential crisis, and I said, what am I going to do? And I realized that it was empowerment, it was partnership, it was trust. Those things were missing. That's why this situation was what it was. And I locked myself in a room with this co-owner, and I decided that by the end of this weekend, we were going to figure out how to restore empowerment, partnership, and trust. I didn't know how we were going to do it. I didn't try to manipulate the situation, but that was the declaration. And by the end of the weekend, those things had been restored. And on the drive back, I had an epiphany. Man, look at this situation that was able to be restored with my co-owner. And it's the same exact situation that I was dealing with my leadership team. I realized I had some things to clean up. And I cleaned up empowerment, partnership, and trust. And I realized that the rest of the organization was missing these things as well. And I cleaned it up with the organization. And it really dawned on me that perspective of panic caused me to take actions that were congruent with panic. And they got me the outcomes that I was always going to get, having created something out of panic. And I realized that it was the perspective I had that controlled my situation. And if I had approached that existential crisis with a new kind of perspective, maybe a perspective of its excitement, for example, that all of the things that happened after that would have been completely different. And it made me realize that there are some things that are qualitative in a business that can't be quantified. If you try to quantify them, you'll actually end up messing things up. There are things that are qualitative that you want to hold at the same level or higher than the level of profitability or the workability. And so what I did was I started looking at the way I was operating the business. I started saying, well, this is incongruent with empowerment. This is incongruent with partnership. And I took a stand in the unknown, not knowing how to solve these things, and I worked with my organization to create new processes, to create new systems that encapsulated partnership, that encapsulated trust, and encapsulated empowerment. We added more. There's fun and connection and abundance. So these things are present in my organization because I create the clearing for them and I declare them to be there. And this is, when you take a stand and make that kind of declaration and take actions that are congruent with it, all sorts of things open up for you. I can't describe what it is like for those things to open up. It's an epiphany. All I can do is recommend that you try it for yourself. Hold some qualitative things that can't be measured, higher than your quantitative things, and see what it results for you. So.
Graham, and thank you very much. I might get a little passionate. I apologize. You might get hit by a little bodily fluid. It's like SeaWorld. We're in the splash zone. I think the answer to this big question, in my opinion, which my story will share, is the bridge between consciousness and do more good, conscious capitalist leaders is authenticity. I'm a Naval Academy graduate. I think it's funny we had 3 in the middle of everywhere with no water. I was refueling a nuclear reactor on a submarine in 1985, and a crane came and hit me and it broke my neck. Flash forward to 2000, and I've left the Navy, I've left a corporate job. I'm now the CEO of Ernst & Young in Asia, managing about $400 billion business, 1,000 employees, and my neck broke again. And this time, it's kind of like one of those near-death experience shows in Netflix or something. I had a near-death experience. And you can listen to the full story on my YouTube channel at JD Messenger. And it was a complete existential crisis with all the strange spiritual and metaphysical phenomenon that one might expect in a near-death experience. And I was laying in bed, and I couldn't, this is after I left the hospital, and I can't walk, I can't talk. It took me 6 months to learn how to walk and talk and chew gum again. And my family came in to try to cheer me up. And now before this, I'm literally flying around the world in 10 days, making 10 stops in all the major cities around the world. My teams are leading the ExxonMobil merger. We're implementing some of the first internet solutions in the world. We're building factories in China. We're doing a lot of important stuff. I used to be much taller. And so my family comes in and they try to cheer me up. And they're telling me about the trip they took to the Great Wall in Beijing. And I didn't go on that trip. And then they're telling me about the trip where they went to Australia and they're playing with the koala bears. And I didn't go on that trip either. I was too busy working. And I'm laying in bed, and I feel like screaming at them. Tears are rolling down my cheeks. And I just want them to leave and let me suffer alone. And so they leave, and again, I got to this one point where I had to get out of bed about 30 days later, and I walked 1 minute in great pain, and the next day I walked 2 minutes, and so again, in 6 months I'm walking and talking and chewing gum. But as I was staring at that ceiling, because all I could do was stare at the plaster in the ceiling, I was wondering, what's wrong with me? I've reached the pinnacle of success. You know, I'm living in a $5 million house. I got fancy Italian shoes and Rolex watch and servants, and I am not happy. I don't go on trips with my family to Beijing or Australia. I'm like, what is wrong with me? So it was a complete existential crisis, spiritual crisis, physical crisis. I read about 40 books in 1 year. The next year I quit my job. And I thought I'd spend a year studying to understand who I am and where I came from and why I'm here and what I'm supposed to do and why I'm not happy. And 1 year ended up being 10 years. And a television show later, and a CNN radio show later, and a best-selling book later, and a whole bunch of other things. I launched this book. Okay, so I wrote the book in 11 days, and I just saw the words. I call it writing on the wall. And it's how I do all my inventing. I see visions and insights in my mind's eye. And so do many of you. And when I'm done, my wife says, what have you been doing? I said, I think I wrote a book. And she said, what's it about? I said, I don't know, I haven't read it yet. And I literally wrote a book that I had no idea what I wrote, and it hit #1 in Amazon and won 5 awards, and that led to then me being asked to speak, and the speaking then led me being asked to coach, and then the coaching led me to creating the Messenger Institute, where we teach other teachers how to do this. And it comes back to being authentic. You see, when I was the CEO of EY, I thought that money made me happy. I thought that the purpose of life was to retire at Station 401k and play golf. And I thought that who I was is what I did, a title. How many Americans introduce themselves with a title? You're not a title, you know? I may be a submarine officer, a father, an author, a television host. I am none of those, I am all those. You have to discover who you truly are. If you want to be a conscious capitalist, if you want to be a do more good leader, you've got to know who you are. And I was lost and confused and convinced that who I was with all those things that I was not because of social norms and paradigms and constructs. And so we are those constructs and paradigms. And tomorrow we're going to do an exercise where we're going to try to trick you to help you discover who you are. What is your center? What is your core? And so that was my awakening, and that was my realization. So thanks for having me here.
I'm so glad. So it's really interesting for me to be here because what I want to do is ask each person talking a million questions because I'm so curious, and it's part of what lights me up. It's part of what really brings me joy. So Jay called and said, hey, could I fill in? And I think always what happens for me is the portals appear. So part of my answer to your question is my own journey. I have a true belief that when we do our work, our internal work, our deep healing work, understanding who we are, living from our core values and authenticity, and I don't mean aspirational core values, I mean the real thing. We do that for all of humanity. So where I come from is the world of mental health. I'm a small town girl from Hastings, Nebraska. Who am I? Just some little gal. I was an entrepreneur. I had my own private practice. with other therapists. And in about 2015, I was, well, honestly, I always loved being a therapist. The golden thread for me was that I got to make a positive difference, holding sacred space, healing the world one person, one family, one couple at a time, and I loved it. And the landscape of mental health changed. And those of you who know about managed mental health know that it, like all this stuff that stinks, started outweighing the joy of what I was doing. And I had a pivotal conversation with a businessman from Omaha. We'd gone to college together. And we probably sat for 2 hours, and at the end of the conversation, he said to me, "Oh my God, Sarah, that was the best conversation I've had in a decade. You need to become a professional executive coach. I know a dozen business leaders who would, line up to work with you." And what happened was the portal appeared. So I loved your chutes and ladders slide that you had, because I often talk about that. The portal, do you know this? Where everything just aligns and you have the courage, you step through it, and zoop, there you are at something new. It happened when you called me. I cleared my schedule so that I could be here for today because Jay said this was the best part of the conference, which is why I'm here. And then he called and said, "Hey, you want to be on the panel?" Zoop, of course. I would love to. So, 2015, I become a professional executive coach. And the journey, my work, leads me, it's always internal first. So I'm working small, I've got a lot of business, it's just me. I hire a life coach because I don't want to do life coaching, I want to work with influential, impact leaders. I want to change the world, but behind the scenes in my own small and quiet way. So, COVID hits, and my business grows exponentially. I'm blown away, because what I learned was proactive leaders, when things get tough, they're not in victim mode. They get proactive, they step into action, they take responsibility. And that means they ask for help when they need it. And they hire great people to help them with what they're doing. So COVID happens. I go from being mostly regional, 2 coaches, me and a life coach, to having a team of coaches, global clients, and my support team is also global, so I have somebody in Europe as well who helps me. None of that would have happened if I wasn't doing my own work and following the expanded consciousness, the energy of every opportunity, and being really clear. Is this a hell yes? That's how I think of it. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no every time. Hell yes today, Jay. Here I am.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead and hold on to the mic. We're going to share that. So I want to share with the audience, whether you're in the virtual audience joining us today or here in the room with us, to think about what question or questions you might have of this panel, all of these things, should people be thinking about, and what has worked for you?
So I actually have done all of those things, do all of those things on a regular basis. I'm a total brain nerd, so I'm really interested in doing anything we can to elevate our consciousness, expand our awareness with what's already happening in our brains. So I have a regular routine. I've actually done everything you've mentioned, but I have a regular daily routine to manage my energy and to take care of myself doing my work, so I show up for my clients the way that I need to and want to. So I have a regular morning routine. I do kind of my own thing where I do breath work, visualization, and Tai Chi. It's all part of setting the intention for the day. I do a regular meditation every night, and if my husband and son are around, they join me. We do it as a family. I have a huge number. It's something I'm quite concerned about. I'll be interested if we'll have questions on this. A huge number of clients and entrepreneurs, and especially some of my Silicon Valley clients, are playing with psychedelics. And so one of the things I love doing is helping people set intentions for that and then ground and integrate their awakenings. So I've done that work personally, I've done that work for clients. I do a whole bunch of little habit stacking things, like I do a gratitude journal every day when I brush my teeth, 2.5 minutes I do it in the morning and at night to keep me focused on what I'm grateful for. And I have another little tiny thing I do. When I wash my hands, I take 3 deep breaths and I smile, because we know that the biology of that can change what chemicals your brain is producing. So I think I'm doing stuff all the time. I'll love to hear what questions people have about this, and I'm really interested, gentlemen, in your answers.
It's interesting that we're all saying a lot of the same things. I'll tell you what I do, but it's all very similar. It's the same thing I teach and work with all my clients. Every day I have an intention. I actually start my intentions on Sunday. I identify the top 3 things that I want to accomplish that week, and I do it again every morning. And I start off every day with, first thing I do when I wake up is drink water. I do my breath work, I do my grounding, I do my yoga and meditation, which to my clients' consternation is probably why I don't really ever start working until 10 or 11 o'clock. Because I will not, I can't violate my protocol for that. The most important thing, look, if you cannot be present and using the full power of your 38 trillion operations a second supercomputer if you're not mindful. And you cannot be mindful if your brain is not working right, you don't have the right nutrients, you don't have the right oxygen, you don't have the right vitamins, and you're busy, stuck. Too many people are stuck right now. They're frozen in fear. And so, fear or confusion is when the head is fighting the heart. The heart saying go this way and the head saying go that way. And things are happening around you, and so you don't know whether to speak your truth. And you're afraid to speak your truth because you've been wounded somehow. Fear, blame, shame, guilt, persecution, betrayal. We are pure energy. Everything is energy, and energy is everything. And so these wounds literally are blocking the flow of information and energy in our body, just like in a computer. And so when you're doing the grounding, it's like you're releasing the electricity. It's like your house has you can see I'm a nuclear engineer, math major, right? I try to bring in the la woo with science and physics, okay? And I love la woo. But your house has a grounding rod so that when that static electricity strikes the house, it goes into the ground and it dissipates. Well, you are an energy magnet. You are attracting his thoughts, my thoughts, all of the thoughts and information from the collective consciousness. 500 billion emails are flying around you. Every television show, radio show, it's flying around you. And your head is just like a dolphin, just like an elephant, just like a bat. This supercomputer, the most powerful in the world, is sending and receiving and tuning in that information. If you don't ground, if you don't breathe, if you don't go in nature, take showers, all that sort of stuff, exercise, you build up this energy and you get very nervous and frustrated. So grounding is essential. The last thing I'll just say is I call them the keystone habits. So the keystone habits include setting your intention, grounding, clearing your mind, breathing, and if you can't clear your mind, because we all get frustrated, you do the contrast method. Contrast method is where you write the things you want to get rid of on the left and the things you're going to flip it to on the right. And you can change patterns. Changing patterns is like brushing your teeth or shaving with the opposite hand, driving to work a different way. When you change patterns, you must be present, otherwise you're gonna have an accident. So we can talk more about that collection of things I call the keystone habits, but I like what Sarah's, said about stacking habits. I talk about that too. So the last thing I'll just say is, one of the reasons why change is hard is because the neural pathway isn't working. So the neural pathways, look, your brain there's no hard drive in there, okay? There's no computer chips. It's water and fiber optic tubes. That's it. That's it, okay? With electrical impulses flying through it. So when you're trying to do a new habit or change your thinking, it's like the electrical impulse is hitting a red light. That neural pathway is closed. You gotta open that neural pathway, turn it into a green light. So when we stack these habits, do this breathing, change our behaviors over and over and over again, in 42 days, you're gonna turn the red light into a green light.
Like my co-panelist, I'm a scientist. I studied math and physics in college. So I look at this from a very logical perspective. And I'd like you to consider that consciousness is about degrees of freedom. It's proportional to the number of possibilities available to you. So how many possibilities are available to a pebble? Like one, it just can sit there. How many possibilities are available to a blade of grass, or a fish, or a human? And what are the things that you can do for yourself that increase possibility? You can, by increasing possibility, you can expand the level of consciousness that you experience. And so if you're afraid, this is a possibility collapsing exercise. If you read a book, this is a possibility expanding exercise. If you can find a way to shut off the voices in your head that tell you you can't do something, that's a possibility expanding exercise. And so I spend something on the order of 10 hours a week in conversations with people, not knowing what those conversations are going to be, but exploring where I'm incongruent in terms of possibility, what things I'm doing that are collapsing possibility, what things I'm doing that are expanding it. And that's how I discover and make iterations on the idea of transformation. I don't think it's required that you spend 10 hours, but what is valuable is confronting the things that cause cognitive dissonance in your mind. The things that you say one thing and you do another, and how can both of those things exist in your mind? Being with that paradox for long enough, maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's an hour, and resolving it. And what that does is it opens up some new possibility for you. It expands the level of consciousness. It expands the things that can be done in your life. And it changes the way that you look at the world. And so I'm in an inquiry about the expansion of possibility.
Thank you so much.
Place of fear. So I really like intentions versus goals. Goals are something you check off. And intentions are something that you say, this is something I intend, this is something I'm going to be doing. So I really love the idea for someone who's about to graduate to practice mindfulness around joy, gratitude, and openness to possibility, this infinite possibility that's around us all the time. I like that very much, and I also like the idea of creating space so that you're not making fear-based decisions. When we're making decisions based in fear, like, oh, I'm afraid I'm gonna miss out, or oh, I'm afraid if I do this, that will happen, so I really better go do that. That's not a really great way to set things up. You're working out of your primitive brain, generally fight, flight, freeze, or I say fawn, which is the person who's codependent. Oh, let me help you, let me do this for you. It's not our most empowered place of being. So I think it would be really powerful for you to set time aside every day, practice mindfulness, whatever works for you, write an intention, when you do that and when you write that intention down, you're activating the reticular activating system, which is the part of our brain that selects what's relevant from the environment. And I could speak more about that. It's how I found Jay, frankly. Have you ever like got a car or thought, ooh, I want a new outfit or new shoes, and then all of a sudden you start seeing that everywhere? Anybody remember that? Raise your hand if you can think of a time you've done that. That's reticular activating system. So if we as humans say, I want to find the most amazing job, and I intend to find it with ease and joy, that's the writer, because I don't want to do anything with work or effort. I want it all to be effortless and fun. Then your brain in the background goes to work looking for all those things for you. That's where I would start, and then it'd be more of a discussion about what do you want to create, because you are the sole creator of your life. You get to do anything you want with it, and you're in the most opportune time. You can go do anything. You don't have any of all those obligations that, those of us with families and all other kinds of things have. So let's see what the guys say.
I find it so funny, we use a lot of the same, I'm always talking about the reticular activation system, but I say it a little differently. As a submarine officer, if I had to fire a torpedo, I had to know what the target is. If you don't know what the target is, you're never going to hit it. Not only are you never going to hit a target that you don't know whether you're on the path to get there. So you must have a target, and you must always know where you are on the path. And that's what the reticular activation system is doing. It's your own internal guidance system, but it's not just internal. It's external. You're receiving we call them synchronicity, signs, coincidences. They are real. And I will do the math on them and prove them to you. I have clients all the time with, they call them, oh, it's a coinky-dink thing. I go, let me calculate the probability of that coinky-dink thing for you and show you how that was a 1 in 10 million probability of an event. Do you still think that wasn't real? Forget how it's working. It's real. Now, let me just quickly say that there's a difference between being mindful and being present. There's two aspects to your life, the inner game and the outer game. The outer game is everything you see, feel. It's your job, business, cars, houses. Everything in the outer game, I'm going to say, is almost 100% determined by your inner game. Your inner game is invisible. It's thoughts and beliefs. It's totally unique to you. If you believe you have a soul, like I believe, then your soul has a purpose and a mission. Okay? So being mindful is being mindful to what is inside you. And everything outside you is a manifestation and a projection of what is inside you. So like Sarah said, you can become and do whatever you want to. You first must be able to imagine it. Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge. Disney said if you can dream it, you can build it. They understood what we're saying. If you can't imagine it, you'll never be able to dream it and never be able to build it. So first you're mindful on the inside, set your intentions, believe in yourself, expand your freedom about your points of freedom, right? I love that. And then go out and make it happen. But be present to what is happening in the environment outside of you. How are others reacting? How are you feeling? And so forth.
You mentioned how does one go out and be successful? And I think the thing that I want to share with you after having done this for 10 years is that successful lives in the realm of qualitative, right? It's not, you might be able to put a number on how much money that you want to make or profitability or something like this, but ask yourself, why do you want that number? And maybe it might be safety or happiness or whatever it ends up being. I'd like you to keep in mind those other qualitative things that success calls for. And recognize that you can't really put a number on happiness. You can't really put a number on the feeling of success. And our attempts to do it actually make us miserable. You hear stories about people who get to the end of their life and they're like, well, this number I had in my bank account really didn't mean anything at all. And so I guess what I'd like to give you with, what I'd like to leave you with is that You get to say whether or not you're successful. You get to say whether or not you're happy. And you get to say what your perspective is. It's not that the money makes you happy. It's not that some number makes you happy. It's that you get to declare, without any reason or logic, whether or not you're successful or whether or not you're happy. I think that's one of the things that humanity really gets backwards. So,
Not sure.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question.
Manifest, right? How do we manifest what it is we want, need, and desire in this world? To speak to that is beautiful, but what I find is a lot of people don't know how to begin this process. And if y'all could share from your beautiful perspectives some techniques to help those that are not in the practice begin by just taking the first step.
That's
Well, I've been listening intently to my co-panelists. I think that we all have slightly different definitions of what intentions are. My definition of an intention is something that you hold for other people, a space of trust being present, something I can hold for other people, a space of partnership, a space of empowerment, a space of fun or abundance. These are things that I can create and hold the space for. How do I determine how do I determine what intentions I'd like to be holding? Well, it ends up being the case that the intentions that I hold solve all the problems that exist in my organization. The problem of, how do I solve this people issue? Well, is trust present? Is empowerment present? Is partnership present? And if my intentions can't solve the problem, maybe it means that there exists another intention that I'm not aware of. And I get to be in the inquiry about what intention I can create that allows for the creation of possibility that I can be holding a space for. And so that's how I create additional intentions.
I agree with you. I do think of it different. There's only three things in the universe: energy, information, and matter. And everything is either being created, destroyed, or maintained by that energy, information, or matter. So we are energy, information, and physical matter. And the highest and greatest use that we as a extremely powerful being of light and energy is to be a creator. More specifically, a co-creator, because we're not really creating anything ourselves. We're creating things with others, we're creating things with the animal kingdom, with the physical environment, and so forth. And so our highest and greatest use is to be a co-creator with others, using the energy and information and matter around us that adds value to communities, societies, and other people. And of course, love is the most powerful force in that universe. And I mean, love is a force. If we want tomorrow, I'll prove it. I brought my divining rods. I use divining rods to show how your thoughts project energy and affect the field of energy around another. So love is a real force. So with that in mind, the most important thing I think you can do is to create an intention to be a co-creator of something that is adding value, from your heart to be of service to others. That is the highest and greatest use that we can. Now, the way we do that, because we may not know what that is to understand our why. Because your why is your purpose, your why is your passion, your why is everything. You always hold on to your why. You do not let anyone tell you what your why is. Only you know your why. But you let go of who you do it with, where you do it, and maybe when you do it. That's what surrendering is. So I always say to people, you never surrender your authenticity and your why, but when you surrender, you surrender how you do it, where you do it, when it happens, and who you do it with. And you set your intention that you're ready to do that, and this is why you want to do that, and this is who you want to help. And it's a little bit like Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, You take that step over the cliff. And when it's meant to happen, it'll happen.
Sarah, I know one of the things that Tanya said was, how do you know what your intentions are if you're in a place where you just don't know? It's not coming to me. Do you have any thoughts on how to find it?
Yeah, I do. It's interesting because I would call myself woo-woo adjacent. That's the term I like. Woo-woo adjacent, which everything you're speaking is what I believe and know to be true. And the question was, how do you start? And so the first thing that popped into my mind was when I first got married, someone from graduate school gave my husband and me, who I've been married to for 28 years, by the way, who I still love, I still like, and I'm still in love with him. They gave us, this friend of mine from grad school gave me a journal and said, write your intentions, write your dreams, your wishes for your marriage. So we did, and I just love a ritual like this. So we have done that actually every year since we've been married. And it started with, nice things like, we intend and hope we find a house. We intend and hope we find good jobs. I remember the first year we had an intention about having better water pressure in the condo. I mean, it doesn't have to be, we're talking at really high levels of consciousness, and it also can be about capturing, articulating what your dreams are. And for me, an intention is a claim. It is staking a claim for something that in this moment I believe to be true and real and that I desire and that I'm going for. That doesn't mean I can't change my mind tomorrow. So we've done this, we've included our son, he's about to graduate from college, and I remember when the first time he did it, his intention was maybe, he had 3. The first one was maybe learn how to tie his shoes. I think he was 5. So you don't have to have a doctorate or anything fancy to figure out intentions. It is about practicing and thinking, what do I want? Here's a great exercise that I love to ask clients to do. Write down a list of 100 desires. So just make a list, 100 things you want, you desire, you wish. So the first 30 are easy, right? It's all the surface stuff. The next 30 are a little bit harder. The final, that's when you really get to the gold. It's like a treasure hunt, right? We're going deep for where the diamonds are to figure out, what do you actually want to desire? What's your soul's calling? That's the type of work that helps you get there. So we do the intention setting as a family. I have a fun thing I do. I have formal intentions personally, professionally, and then we do in our family book, we're using the same one for 28 years. We write them down. I like to use Dear Future Me. It's you write yourself a letter. And so I'll write myself a letter. I intend that, whatever it is, I have a job and I have a new apartment for the gal who's graduating by Christmas. And then I have it'll automatically mail you the letter. You'll get an email that then shows up in your inbox and you go, oh, have I done this? Most of the time, because your reticular activating system is working, it happens. So that's another fun way to just play a game.
And when you were setting these intentions, did you know how to get there?
No.
Yeah, okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the unknown and just being with the unknown. And the reason that might sound woo-woo, making some kind of declaration like that, is because you don't know how you're going to get there. And I found that this setting with the unknown is probably one of the more fundamental fears. And we sit here and we're afraid of what happens when we die. And we're afraid about what happens if we were to say X, Y, Z thing and how we might look. And we let those fears prevent us from actually accomplishing something are actually trying to set an intention for ourselves. And I think that fear being a possibility collapsing exercise, that we should give some thought to whether or not that's something that we want for ourselves.
Good. All right, looks like we have another question.
So I've noticed that mindfulness and healing is kind of a marketing problem. When I go out to certain communities, or even when I go back home and visit my own original culture, I speak of the language of mindfulness, setting intentions, and all the woo-woo stuff that we were
You
talking
get a
about.
little closer to the mic. I don't think our online audience can be able to hear. Thank you.
I'll just start again. So I noticed that mindfulness and healing has kind of a marketing problem. So I'll give the example of whenever I visit back home or when I go to certain different rural communities, even here in Nebraska, I use the language of mindfulness, healing, setting intentions, positive intentions, and I use a lot of those woo-woo words, and people just, their brains shut down. It doesn't sink in, they repel it, they reject it. It's something that's threatening to them, it's threatening to their identity. Healing is something that is a weakness. So how do you remarket healing and mindfulness and all these woo-woo words in a way that people will actually listen to it? I use sweary affirmations. If I didn't start there, I wouldn't have done it. So how would you do it?
Well, the first thing is, when we were born, with the date timestamp, we were born with programs. Those programs come from constructs, political, social, theological, environmental, and they created paradigms, which are belief systems, which come with labels. And the paradigms and the labels are the sources of all judgment and anger and negative emotion. So, when I grew up as a kid, John Kennedy was president, and the man worked, and the mother stayed home wearing an apron. And I Love Lucy was on television, and we hid under a desk to prepare for the nuclear invasion and so forth. Women weren't allowed to have a bank account, let alone be in Congress or the White House. And you see where I'm going? So these are programs, and these programs have all these labels, and they formed my identity. And so whenever you're using a word like healing, or la la woo, or anything, Republican, Democrat, woke, any word, the brain goes in and it searches the database, and it has a belief system around every one of those words. And therefore, if that word is congruent with my paradigms or beliefs, I don't have a negative reaction. You understand what I'm saying? Okay, so the answer to your question is, unless you want to do a lobotomy and change that person's paradigms and programs, you're never going to get anywhere. So you must use different words. So you must, if I'm talking to somebody, I was talking to somebody about being an environment, saving the air and the water, and called me a darn liberal. I said, what do you mean by that? I said, doesn't the word conservative mean to conserve air, conserve water? Shouldn't we all want to have enough air and water? And, but he couldn't get this liberal branding out of his mind. This is just an example. So you have to, and I'll be done in 20 seconds, you have to try to come up with a different word that does not have any attachments and labels to it. You see what I'm saying? So whatever healing might mean to you, is obviously very different from what that healing word means to that other person. So just pick the word, get to the root of what it is you're trying to say. What do you mean by healing? Conquer fear? Heal an organ? Fix a bone? I mean, what are you trying to say? Get to the root of it.
Yeah, I think I want to bring into the equation a concept from Taoism. It's called the Wu Wei. It's this idea of non-forcing, or allowing things to play out as they were ready to fight out. It's this idea that if you're gonna fight the river, you've only got so much energy with which to fight the river, and as soon as you stop, you're going downstream. And I think what you're stuck with is the paradox of being a stand for somebody and also them not getting it. And I think if you can be with that paradox and be with the idea of, well, you're not ever going to force somebody to change their mind. I think that if you can be with that paradox, you'll discover something. And it doesn't have to be one of the things that we say, but it's something that you can create with that person.
I think what occurred to me was, would you be able to name what the pain is? Because you asked specifically about marketing. So I was curious about, could you paint the picture of here's what the pain is, and after, here's what life is like. So you don't have to use healing. Or, I wondered, is there a way, could you speak, because you'll resonate. If you paint the picture of what it's like to be alive, you will resonate with the people who need whatever the medicine is that you have. So if you're able to say, here's a snippet, a story, and here's what life is like after, that might draw to you the people that you want to attract for the healing that you're offering.